Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we bring you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. Each episode, you'll dive into conversations with top entrepreneurs, visionaries, and business leaders, unlocking the secrets to building profitable relationships that drive growth and success. Whether you're looking to expand your network, find new referral partners, or scale your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Partnerships for Profit. I'm your host, Macy J, and I'm joined with an amazing woman here with us today. We've got Zara. Zara is an amazing family attorney, but let's learn a little bit more about Zara Zeringue here. She's a powerhouse in Louisiana, right here in Louisiana, family law, and one of the few women attorneys to earn her prestigious AV Preeminent rating from Martindale-Hubbell. So Zara is the founder of her Covington-based law firm, former chair of the Louisiana State Bar Association's Family Law Section, and she's a leading voice in custody, domestic violence, and father's rights advocacy. So welcome, Zara.
Thank you. That's a big welcome. I thank you. Appreciate it.
How are you feeling today, Zara?
It's good. It's like right before July 4th, so feeling like a weekend's coming.
It is. We're feeling like it's a weekend. We're giving this 4th of July firework kind of energy. I'm excited to get to know you here today. You are a powerhouse, and I'm excited to be able to sit down and learn about your message and what you're passionate about. If you have not known before, folks, Zara has been on with us here on the Partnerships for Profit podcast, but this time I'm going to get to know her. So it's going to be a great time. So I always like to start, the episodes with a little, 3 icebreaker questions to kind of get to know you with the little would you rather. So are you feel like you're ready for the pressure?
Yeah, absolutely. Bring it on.
Let's do it. Okay, so for the first question, would you rather win a high-profile custody case that changes state legislation or successfully mediate 100 contentious divorces with no court battles?
That's pretty easy. Mediation of many. Settlement of many cases, much better.
No court battles, make it easy.
Yeah, well, mediation's not necessarily easy, but at least the parties are in control. So
okay. So you would choose mediation. Okay. Second, would you rather represent a client who's always honest but emotionally unpredictable, or a calm, cooperative client who hides important facts?
I don't know that exclusive, a lot of times it's a little bit of a mixture or not sure what it is. So, I'm okay with
either
whatever presentation there is, to a limit, of course. But that's some people just have trouble sharing information or
totally.
Yeah,
so you're kind of okay with whatever, but you just gotta kind of have to deal with the cards you're dealt.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Sometimes it's a matter of developing trust,
right,
and rapport with the client, and then that can shift things too. So.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe if they feel comfortable with you, they won't feel the need to hide anything. So
right.
I like that you mentioned that. I mean, you got to build that trust up, and it seems like you're a very trustworthy attorney if you're getting a bunch of accolades. But before we get into the meat and potatoes, we got one more. Would you rather?
Okay.
One more is, would you rather specialize only in amicable divorces with minimal conflict, or handle high conflict cases with big financial stakes?
High conflict cases with big financial stakes.
Oh, okay.
I mean, maybe not 365 days a year, because I'm burned out, but
Okay, I'm
It's
picking up what you're
exciting.
putting down.
Mhm.
Those were a little tough. Those were a little tricky, but that kind of warms us up with our icebreaker. And I'm excited to get to know you and more about family law. So I'm excited because we have opportunities to interview all kinds of attorneys. We've had trial attorneys, criminal attorneys. There are so many kinds. So being able to tap into the family side of things is really hitting home for me. So just to get things started, what do you think is the most misunderstood part of family law that people get wrong?
The expectation, I guess, that things will move faster than they actually do, and that you will have all this time to share your story with the judge.
It's
That
not a lot of time.
just doesn't happen most of the time. And even if you do get some face time with the judge, it's very, a constricted opportunity. It's not unlimited
Yeah.
and got a lot of structure to it. So people are
I like
a lot of times disappointed or dismayed that, oh, I didn't get to really share. I mean, it's really my job to share the story and develop the story throughout, the whole case, every opportunity I get, in front of the judge.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, thinking about the time restrictions, when you're in court, you think you have so much time, but it's really restricted, and it's up to you to be able to share that story in the most powerful ways possible with a short amount of time. I didn't think about it like that, but court is very time restricted. So you got to follow the schedule. So now that you mentioned that, what's a moment in court that has completely surprised you? Like, what has thrown you for a loop?
Well, this was a long time ago, but I had a client who was also a friend, and it was her parents had passed away, and so they were deciding what to do with the family home, and she was in disagreement with her siblings. Imagine that.
Wow.
And we had a very contentious hearing, and my client just jumped up and yelled at the judge and called him a liar. And
Oh, wow.
that was pretty shocking. The judge was shocked too. He was like, fell back in his chair and was trying to hit the button underneath the counter to bring his bailiff in.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes these cases you forget, people get so emotional about a lot of things that it's surprising, but then at the same time, you're like, wow, when somebody's so passionate about something, you don't realize, wow, this is really impacting somebody's life here. And even the judge, might be able to get a few lashings just from people's responses. So how do you handle that? How do you handle someone just being that emotional and they need to have some counsel to just kind of calm down a little bit?
Well, I happen to be a certified yoga instructor, but even before that, I did that during COVID. But before that, I would also, do some exercises or give some tools to my clients to prepare themselves to be on the stand or just to be in the courtroom. And that is just getting present and calm and breathing. So simple, but very, can be difficult for people in high, anxious, stressful situations. So I definitely address that.
That is a great point that you said there, because you got the yoga background, so you can help people with their breathing and kind of calming them down, which is some great tools to use when you're in court. So when we talk about domestic violence, is that just defined as like mom and dad fighting, or is that also covering family violence where maybe the parent is violent towards the kids? Do you tackle that too?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Okay.
And it is, what I find is some people have a hard time understanding what constitutes domestic violence, and a lot of victims even aren't really sure or clear, for many, could be many reasons. But just getting them to understand that, hey, that is domestic violence. Like,
Right.
it is.
I never thought of it that way. I'll just share a little bit of, about myself. My family household growing up, it was a lot of violence growing up. So my father was an alcoholic, and so there was a lot of physical violence that was with him. And so a lot of people don't talk about the family violence that does happen. It kind of does, people don't want to talk about it, that is categorized as domestic violence. And what would you do in a situation? Let's say I'm a kid and my father is being irate and he's being violent. How would you counsel someone, or what advice would you give to someone who's a kid and they don't know what direction to go when their father is very violent?
To approach someone that they trust, maybe at the school, a counselor, a teacher, someone like that, because those are mandatory reporters. And so, something can, assistance can be given in that way. So yeah, but that's, that's a tough thing to see. I mean, there can be, if a parent comes forward, then I can support, the parent in getting custody and getting the violent parent, away from the child and addressing, that person's issues.
That's great that you say that. They do have those mandated reporters at the school. And then if, let's say, if there's, the other parent that's like, hey, I need some help here, I need to get this figured out, that's when you start to bring in calling a family law attorney to kind of get that situation, the process started. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, that's right. Because then you have, government assistance for, people that might not be able to, afford an attorney, to handle that.
Right.
So there are so much, there's a lot more resources than what there used to be as far as organizations and public awareness.
Absolutely. This is so great to learn about on the other side, because when you're a kid, you don't really, know about any of these things. And so just being able to talk with you about this is just super fascinating. So what can you say, now that you have, some incredible accolades, what do you think has been the most rewarding case of your career? What was what kind of impact did you make in that case?
I would say more, I guess there have been a couple of closed head injury cases, with people that have been severely injured, because I do some personal injury too. Those have been very rewarding to help someone not only recover early, but to kind of get their life together on a path that they can, have a, meaningful life. So that's been rewarding. And then I would say probably more recently, I've represented some fathers who have been successful in, getting their voice heard and getting, their custodial time with their child or their children. Yeah.
Oh yes, I'm glad that you kind of you mentioned that part about fathers, because I feel, my brothers, they're all fathers, and one of them mentioned, I just feel like there aren't a lot of people speaking up for the voices of fathers who are really good fathers, and let's say they want to spend more time with their kids, and it's a very difficult situation for that to happen. So what can you say to fathers who want to speak up and they want to, be there for their children, and they're in a situation where the mom maybe doesn't want them to see their kid?
Well, hire a good attorney who is
Right?
willing to go to battle for you. And there are just some consistent, things, interactions that you can do. Like always make the effort, even if it's not rewarded.
Totally.
If you're trying to do the FaceTime call and you're not getting an answer, do it anyway. I have people take screenshots of it. I have all these, and over time, like that particular instance, it made a big difference, with 7-8 months of FaceTimes not answered at the court ordered time.
Right.
So
it's definitely, you saying that at least you're trying. You have evidence that, hey, I'm putting in the effort. I care about my kid. I want to see my kid, and that's all that really matters, as long as you're putting in that effort. I mean, I completely agree. So you said that you have had some incredible success with personal injury. You've been able to help with that. And I mean, your catalog is crazy. Your catalog is literally crazy. So, how have Louisiana domestic violence laws evolved since, before the pandemic, 2018? What are people still overlooking as it relates to domestic violence laws?
Yeah, so there was a big change in 2018. There were some greater enforcement provisions for custody and visitation, some requirements, restrictions. So if someone has a history of perpetrating family violence, or one incident where there was serious bodily injury, and it's not necessarily limited to like the person they're in a relationship at that moment, or a child. It can be a past dating partner, if they have a history, or a pattern of behavior of violence that can, be brought up, and consequence, the court is not permitted, they're not allowed to let that person have unsupervised visits with the minor children. And so it has to be supervised, which is a really big deal. And then if they want to do an anger management class, but not just any anger management class, it has to be one that is 26 weeks long, and under the methodology, it's called the Duluth model. So it's a particular type of anger management program. And of course, they have to be substance use, free, drug free, if they want to lift the supervision. And so that's been a major impact. Like, before that, sometimes I would ask people if there's domestic violence, like in a initial consult, whether, man, woman, doesn't matter. But not always. But now, it is a requirement. Like, I think it's a requirement for any attorney representing anybody in family law. You have to ask whether there's any kind of domestic violence, any side, between children, past, whatever, like all that, because the way the law is written, you can bring the issue of domestic violence can be raised at any time. Like, you don't have to let, you don't have to let the, the court know in advance. Like, if it happens to come up during testimony, which it, did me recently in a case, it was just, I, won the case, but the other side, it made an admission that she had a domestic violence conviction in another state, which I wasn't aware of, my client wasn't aware of, and another state. So even if I would have done like a background check or something like that, I would not necessarily have picked that up in another state. But once that came out, it was like, boom, the judge was like, I can't do anything else but give dad sole custody. You got supervised visits.
Wow. So if you have some sort of history of domestic violence at all on your record, it has to be supervised. any sort of visitation or whatever that happens, it has to be supervised.
Yeah, if the like there is a little, of course, a little gray area. Sometimes, there's nuances to that. So,
Right.
sometimes depending on the situation, if let's say if it was a while back and both mom and dad feel like there isn't really a high risk moving forward, then, there is a way to kind of address that and do a little bit of a workaround, but it's very, it's pretty narrow. And I just, I don't know if everybody, like a lot of lawyers, I mean, it's getting out more and more, but I mean, it was 2018, so we're here, a few years passed, but
Yeah.
it is a way more than a lot of people think it is,
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about the anger management part that you mentioned, that you've got to do like 26 weeks. Has anger management always been like a requirement, or has that been something new that's come up to where you have to take that in order to get the supervision lifted?
Well, I think it was part of the law before, but I just don't think that it was applied as often as it is. Maybe wasn't the issue wasn't raised as often,
right?
So I think and then a lot of times on the like criminal side, if there's some sort of criminal component, they'll have the anger management requirement, like on a diversion program or probation. They'll have that side too. So it's
I think
been around.
I honestly, I mean, just the fact that they're starting to apply that a little bit more, I feel like it's in the best interest of the kids and everybody involved, because I feel like there's actually some really great benefits to anger management, because maybe they did not learn those skill sets, growing up, and they're like, oh, I didn't realize this was a problem. There are other ways that I can address my anger instead of being violent, So I think that that's actually a very helpful tool in terms of just getting that part addressed and making it safe for everybody. And when we think about like the context of fathers, I want to know, like, what inspired your CLE talk, Roadblocks to Fatherhood, and what do you think is the biggest legal challenge that dads face today? Would it be custody? Is there anything else that stands in the way?
Well, I guess what inspired me to do the CLE was a case where I was representing a father who's the mother of his child wanted to give that child up for adoption, and they weren't married. So the father didn't have any say. And when, like, on the front end, and adoption agency was involved, and he like went to the hospital. He was, there right after the birth, and the adoption agency was there, representative, and was, told him he needed to go get a DNA test at the drugstore. And then when he left to go get it and came back, he wasn't allowed back in. And and so they, he retained us. We went, opposed it, which is like a real short deadline. I don't remember exactly what time, like how many days, but it's very short, like 10 days or 15 days.
Yeah.
And then basically he had to turn around and prove that he was a good person, even though like he's the father. Yeah. He had to prove that he was a good person. And fortunately for him, he had gone to doctor's visits with the mom. He had given her money. He was there. He was expressing, desire to have a relationship with the child. And he was a great citizen. He wasn't from this country, but he owned a house here. He owned more than one. He was in construction.
Wow.
So, he was like contributing to society, upstanding person. And he had a lot of support put up for him that had, just a lot. He had a lot of support. So, he wound up being successful. Thank goodness. But it was a really rough case. Like, there were tears for a lot of people in the audience, when he would stand. And the people, the parents who were going to adopt the baby were present on Zoom. And at first, their video was off, and I told the judge and asked the judge to make them put the video on, because I wanted to see and monitor their reaction as this father testified, which I didn't mention. The father already had another child with this woman who was like 5 years old. So it's like,
right. So, okay. That makes sense. Okay.
Child, and then you're just going to, unbeknownst to not even tell the dad, and then just.
That's crazy.
It can happen.
So what was the reaction of the adopted parents on the Zoom? Like, what was the reaction to his testimony?
Oh, well, by the, it went, we thought it was going to be like 2-hour hearing, but it went the third day.
Wow.
They gave up. They just said, no, we're out.
Wow. There's pain points on both sides.
I know. It was awful.
You're excited because you're like, we get to adopt a kid. We get to adopt a baby. But then on the other side, like, this is my flesh and blood. This is like, I birthed this child, or he didn't birth it, but I'm just saying, like, I took part in the process. I showed up at the doctor's visits. Like, I'm really present. And then it's almost like a form of like emotional betrayal to know, like, I'm here. Why would you do that? Like, where we have a kid together.
I put a little responsibility on the agency, because they actually orchestrated the child, which newborn, being flown across the country to the parents that wanted to adopt. So here, this process is just beginning. And these new parents are, bonding with this newborn, so, I felt bad for them. I mean, that was emotionally difficult for them. It was ugly.
So they already spent time. They spent time with the newborn until the case was pretty much over.
Yeah.
Wow. I feel like that's devastating, like, just on both ends, because you get your hopes up, you start the process, you think it's going to go one way, and then it doesn't. But then, I don't know, just kind of like turning your back to the father after, like, hey, I have the DNA test right here. Like, I'm here we go.
You can't get back in the building. What?
I think I would lose my mind. Like, if somebody told me that, like, what do you mean I can't get back in the building? Like, I followed your procedure, and then it's kind of like betraying the actual flesh and blood. That is a powerful story. And there are so many fathers out here that are fighting every day for their own kids. And even if it is like, if it isn't adoption or whatever, they still want to be in the life of their kid. They want to show up. They want to be there. But then, there's a lot of times, a lot of women are like, I don't want the kid. Like, sorry, that's not what I want anymore. And I feel like you have to jump through hoops and hoops if you're the dad, just to get the custody of your kid if the mom doesn't want the kid. And I wonder why that is. You know what?
I think it's just historical and cultural, but this is a public service announcement. There is something called a putative father registry. Father registry. And so if you're, dating someone, or you're married to someone, and you think that, well, marriage doesn't count, but if you're dating someone and you think that they might be pregnant and you might be the father, then you can go through the state of Louisiana and, write down your name, give information, and then like adoption agencies are, required to review that registry to see if anybody has claimed to be the father of that child. So that's like just like a little thing that, maybe, you might like at least get noticed, that this is going down. You
So
know?
as soon as somebody, let's say somebody's pregnant or something like that, you can go on a registry to go ahead and claim the kid in advance.
Yeah.
Whoa, I never knew that. I don't even think
Yeah.
people really know much about that.
No. Of course, you'll be on the hook eventually, that you can't, that comes with the territory.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Okay, so I'm gonna keep this in mind, folks. If you ever find, like you say, if you're dating someone and you find out that they're pregnant and you want to go ahead and just get stuff started in advance in Louisiana, you have the opportunity to put your name on that registry, and so maybe that'll help
Yes.
you in that process.
And most states have that or something similar.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah,
so
most states
even if you're
do.
a different state, it's not just a Louisiana
Mhm.
thing.
If you go to Florida for the weekend,
Florida's got one too. If you were
That's
in a
right.
weekend, 4th of July,
But I mean, we just said it. In the past, we've also had situations where, like, a woman told the man that she had an abortion and she didn't, and so he finds out like years later that he's got this.
Wait.
child.
So she told him that she had an abortion, but she really didn't, and he's like, "What?" So
Years later,
yeah, still here.
somebody's like, "Hey, you might want to check this kid out. He looks a lot like you."
Oh no! I mean, imagine finding out in that way. Imagine, oh my goodness, like, hold on, like this kid actually really does look like me. So I wonder how he went about finding out, like, more about. I'm like, okay, well, if the kid looks like me, then what? You go contact the mom? Like, what happened after that?
It sounds like something out of like an old novel or something, that
Yes.
all of a sudden, you're like a teenager and you find out that you have a dad and your mom told you that the dad is deceased and your dad didn't know you existed, and we're still doing that in 2025.
Yeah, like I'm like mind blown that you just shared that. But it's like, it's crazy because like I don't hear about these stories, but this stuff happens all the time. Like, and we just don't know about it. And hearing these stories, we need to hear this because there's a lot of people who are not very good people who are just lying and just really breaking people's hearts out here. And there are some really great men who want to step up to be great fathers, and sometimes they're not awarded that opportunity. They have to prove that they're a good citizen in order to have access to their flesh and blood, which is insanity. But now that we've talked about a little bit about the roadblocks to fatherhood, this was really great to talk about, I want to know more. Like, how has your role as a chancellor at St. Michael's shaped your outlook on justice and compassion and being able to be an advocate for so many people? What does that look like for you?
So it's mostly been in something that, like, they have called upon me with a legal issue. It's usually not that like closely related to helping people necessarily. It's more associated with, we hired this contractor that didn't do the roofing. However, that being I've also been on the board, or what they call the vestry of the church. And then just participating over the years in the various programs. There's one in particular that provides very short-term housing, like church premises for like a few nights. And so there's organizations in the community that share that responsibility. So they host, families for a few days. And, then they go someplace else to be hosted, and they're fed, and, there's community is built, and, there's, a lot of families that have that need of maybe a transition, just a very, could be very short, could be longer, but nice to see that, that need is being addressed, and some in a meaningful, way. So
yeah, it seems like you have just a heart of empathy for those who are just going through some challenging times. And I feel like that's a requirement to be in family law. Like you can't be in this field and not care about people. And, you advocate for ethical law. Why do you think it's important to be ethical? Regardless of what industry you're in, why is that important to you?
Oh, well, it's pretty much dictates, your reputation, career, in turn, the fulfillment of the practice of law.
True.
It trickles down, a lot of different areas. If, you aren't regarded as ethical or trustworthy, you're seen differently by the courts. And, if that's a quality that, you're not sure, you need to find an attorney has that quality or not the best you can, because you're going to be impacted by their reputation. Not every attorney is for every person,
right.
So, you have to wisely and not necessarily go with the first person you meet. You gotta connect with them. And
oh yes,
yeah.
I like that you said that you're looked at differently by the courts if you're not an ethical attorney. So I think it's crazy that it goes all the way down to your cases, how people are viewing you, like your reputation, like you said, not only in the community, but how are the courts looking at you? Are you gonna, maybe your reputation will help if they know, okay, so she works with integrity. She's going to represent her client in the best way. This might go in her favor, just in general, just because if I know I'm working with somebody that has my best interests and they're not a con man, they're not out to get me, they're not in it for just the money, then I know that I can trust them and I can open up to them. And you're not going to screw me over.
It's also, attorneys are officers of the court. So they, in essence, work for justice. They work for the court. They work for things, to be equitable, So I have been in the courtroom where the other side was presented. And, the judge has said, look, you can go, in the other room with Ms. Zeringue and y'all can talk about how to work this out. She's, not going to take advantage of you, and
wow.
They, which is such a high compliment, to, be given that credibility.
Yeah. From a judge, the judge is like, hey, she's gonna take care of you. And, it's like you say, it's a great compliment to know that people look at you as the one that's the trusted one. And I especially with family law, it's just such a touchy, there's a lot of stuff that can happen, like the domestic violence cases, very touchy. So you have to be trustworthy or your clients aren't gonna attempt to open up to you. And so now that we are getting towards the end of our episode, which has been so fun being able to just sit down and chat with you, what kind of advice would you give to a young person who maybe they're in law, they don't know which direction they want to go in? What advice would you give to someone who wants to get started in your path?
I would say, I guess foremost, do whatever you can to find a mentor.
Ooh.
Find a mentor, and that require you to not be afraid to ask for help. Not be afraid to say you don't know, which that took me forever to be able to admit, but now but once you feel confident enough to, I don't know, then you're like, I don't know. Then there's freedom, right? And you're like,
Right.
So, but find a mentor. It's so important because, you know, if you don't have a mentor, then the young tend to be more like litigious, brazen, you know, like, because they're kind of scared, right? Because they don't, or unsure, whatever adjective you want to use, but
right.
you know, it's a different approach, a different, you know, energy, and really pretty visible to people who have a lot of experience, you know?
Absolutely.
So finding a mentor, and then also finding, you know, balance with the profession, especially family law, because it's a very stressful career.
Yeah. Having that balance, and I mean, just being able to listen to a few attorneys, it just seems like you guys are really like putting the burdens on your shoulders for and advocating for people. You're literal officers of the court, so it's like you really have to advocate for these people, and it can be stressful. So having that balance of like, okay, how do I pour into myself? How am I taking care of myself so that I'm able to show up my best? And then also having a mentor where like, listen, I don't have the answers. I don't know what I'm doing. So having someone to balance, you know, your questions and things, and new scenarios come up every day. So you'll have somebody to kind of get some brainstorming from as well. And with this episode, this is going to be distributed everywhere. And, you know, let's say we have one of our own audience members who's like, I really like Zara. I want to get in contact with her. Where can we find you? Where can we find you to talk to you about whatever we're going through at home?
Sure. Website, lawyerincovington.com. You can certainly Google my name, Zara Zeringue. Phone number, 985-801-0050. I had a consult yesterday. First time, I always ask people how they referred to me. I got ChatGPT referred me. So,
whoa! Okay, Chat, we got the AI. So all you got to do, folks, just type in her name, Zara Zeringue. You're going to see her. And we're also going to, you know, let some folks know about you as well and the work that you do here in Louisiana, because sometimes we feel safe with the trustworthy woman who's doing her thing out here. And it's been, just hearing these stories have impacted me, just hearing all of the work that you've done. And so we want to say thank you on behalf of Partnerships for Profit for coming back on here, hanging out with us, giving some of your wisdom, your stories, your knowledge, and inspiring the next generation of attorneys who want to be just like you one day. So thank you guys.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Zara. Thank you guys for watching. That's it on Partnerships for Profit. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Partnerships for Profit. We hope you've gained valuable insights on how to form profitable partnerships and take your business to the next level. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Got a partnership story to share or someone you'd like to see featured on the show? Reach out to us. Until next time, keep building those partnerships for profit.